Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Mindful LCA podcast. Today we have an hermano, the OG, the one that started everything for me that I talked about a couple times, kind of like open up my eyes to society and systems and the things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about critical consciousness. So yeah, looking forward to it, very excited. Norma, how are you doing today?
I'm tired. We know my relationship with sleep is not the best, so yesterday I had a little bit of a rough night. So I'm tired today. How are you?
Nice. I'm great. I'm having a good nice little stretch here. Started fasting again, like I was mentioning to you before we started recording. I'm on a 24-hour fast right now. I went for a 2 mile run this morning, doing good. And then
Hey.
what I was also mentioning to you off air, this whole thing that has me like feeling good about the Red Note app. So the people that don't know, TikTok's supposed to be banned on 5 days. So everybody on TikTok said, "Oh, really? You want us to go to Meta? Fuck you." They went to a Chinese TikTok directly called like Red Note, and everybody's just going there. And Meta stock is down like 2%. So like
Nice.
they thought they were gonna force people to go in there, and everybody's like, nah. And everybody like is the number one downloaded app and everything of that. So like we talk about uh censorship and all that shit. They're like, nah, the people are not having it. They said, oh, you're worried about the data here. Now the funny thing is that the app is in Chinese, so you're accepting to the terms without even knowing what the fuck you're accepting. So
Cool.
everybody's just like going in there. And I saw that like developers and everything are trying to make it so you can translate what is fucking, because everything is like most of it is in Chinese. So they're working at for you to be able to see it. So it feels good to see people come together, and it already has is the most downloaded app. And it just feels good to be like, oh yeah, you thought you had us and you thought you can be able to censor and put all that stuff, but like, all right, now we're going directly to the Chinese app. How are you doing, Luis?
I'm good. I feel overall blessed. A lot of good things going on. Professionally and personally. Of course, we always have our challenges that come up or day to day challenges, but overall, I feel like I'm in a really good place, and I'm also similar to what you were saying, Steve. More focused on my health and been more focused on my health for the last couple of years now. And I've noticed a big difference like in my energy, my mood. So yeah, all things considered, again, I'm feeling very blessed these days.
Awesome,
Good.
awesome.
Yeah.
And you wanna go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit, tell people here who you are,
Sure,
what
sure.
you
So,
about.
I guess a little bit first, like professional background, a little bit of a personal background. So currently, right now, I'm it's called the acting vice president of student services at Skyline College in San Bruno. Prior to that, I was the dean of counseling at the college for about 8 years or so. And then prior to that, I was a college counselor. And I had the privilege of working with a lot of programs like Puente and Hermanos, like you stated, Steve, and other programs like EOPS and a wide range of programs that work primarily with our low income students of color, right? But the my journey to get here, right? Like if you would have asked me when I was a 13-year-old what I would be doing when I was 41, I couldn't
Damn.
even have had a dream to tell you that I'd be a vice president at a college. I mean, it'd be like so out of the realm of possibilities at that day or during that time. In part because especially as I think back to like my high school experience, like I wasn't a believer in school. You know what I mean? Like I
Mm.
just I did it because I had to go to high school. I mean, like it's like I never felt the passion to go to school during those days. I borderline hated school. And so to think that now my profession is working with education, I never would even have been able to dream it. And then a little bit of my personal background. My parents were immigrants from El Salvador. Primarily, was raised in a lower income neighborhood and kind of just navigating a lot of the challenges that a lot of other Latino low income folks still navigate to this day, but in a different way now. But there's still a lot of similar challenges as well. I was the first in my family to graduate from college and then eventually from the universities. I had to figure out a lot of this, overcoming a lot of the systemic inequities that our students still face to this day, which for
Mhm.
me was part of the passion, what fueled me to then be an educator, because I personally lived through a lot of what, through a lot of the similar challenges that I talk to my students about to this day, and now my work has shifted from directly working with students to now trying to prepare our counselors and our educators to be the best that they can be in working directly with our students, and so yeah, my work has shifted, but it's still very meaningful to me, which is very important. So
Awesome. Yeah, now that you're mentioning that, like, that makes sense, because that's what you're saying is exactly what you did for me. Because I remember finding out that the system part of it, wait, there's more to it. I'm just not like unmotivated or lazy, or not interested in school because it's just a thing. It was based on all the systems that were set up to kind of put me in that path, right? So and I was tell Norma a few times ago, a couple episodes ago, how that understanding systems now, understanding how things work, like, I fucking love that. And from you literally opening my eyes to that shit, to this day I just look at why, and why do we do this, why does this work like this, and the system works like that, and this is this way, or why are things this way, and it's that curiosity, I think, that you open up my eyes to, that spark that, like I always say, you were the person who started me on the path of who I am today.
mm,
And even to tie it a little bit to the mental health stuff, is even when I was going through those struggles, the ability to think, to ask questions, to think critically through the thing, to be like, I remember telling myself, like, there has to be other people going through this, there has to be some studies about this shit, there has to be a way, there has to be somebody that can help me, I can't be alone. And I put and tie all that together, even back to then, to the high school days, because this, what I'm talking about, happened when I was like 28. And from then, from high school days to then, just it affected me in all those ways, to be able to think critically all the way across.
yeah, and when I think back on that too, is like, and I say this to our educators to this day, is like, our students that live, in those conditions on a day and day basis, like, they are the experts of, these systems of, eventually critical consciousness, because they live it. What's been missing is right space or the right people to help our youth have those kind of conversations, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if you remember, right, but like, one of the things that I always loved doing with the youth was that diagram, right, where we would kind of put, like, okay, like, in education, what are the barriers that you see in our neighborhoods, from a familial
Yes.
perspective, from an
Mhm.
individual perspective, right?
Mhm.
And like, I didn't give you guys prior to that any readings or anything. It was just literally asking your opinions, right?
Mhm.
And we started writing everything down, right? And then we ended up with a whole board of all the kind of different barriers that are in place, that a lot of them are outside of you as an individual, but are
Mhm.
more so related to, like say, attending schools with the least resources, or attending schools with least experienced teachers, or not having the right supplies, all those things, right, that are for the most part outside of your control, right?
Mhm.
And then you see that just by asking the youth their opinions, they laid it out all for us,
Mhm.
without having done any reading
Mhm.
whatsoever. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
then you go do the reading, and you see the reading and the research says what the youth already said, just based on their lived experience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that was, it's funny. That's the exact class that I'm talking about. That's the exact moment that I'm talking about. Like, I remember it clearly when I was like, oh shit, there's all these other things. Yeah. They just, yeah. I'm
And
still
the
very
other
thankful
the
for
other
that
thing
shit.
that is also sometimes very, like, I guess a very easy way of putting it is, like, sometimes, like if you review the educational outcome data, right? And like, back in those days, it was like, 50% of Latinos, didn't, graduate high school. And then we follow the trajectory, right, all the way to like less than 1% of Latinos having a doctorate degree, right? And then we would compare it with other demographics, and then just straight up asking folks, like, why do you think our outcomes are so much lower? Is it because as Latinos we don't work hard, because we're not as smart as other people? Like, is it because of that? Right? I mean, and then obviously like, nah, like, hell nah, like, we are hardworking, like, we do work hard, this and the other, right? It's like, so it's not right, it's not the individual that reproduces these outcomes, is the systems around us that reproduce these outcomes, right?
Mhm.
But at the same time, And I don't remember if you remember this. I don't know if you remember this, but I would also say, like, once you have had the opportunity or the privilege to learn this and to have conversations around this, you no longer are a helpless victim,
Yeah.
right? You can't just say, oh, I'm gonna continue to fuck up, or I'm not gonna do XYZ because of the system. Like, nah, bro. Like, now you know what's around you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now you have an active choice.
Yeah.
Are you gonna like let fall into place to what you're expected to be based on the system around you, or are
Yeah.
you gonna make a choice to be something different? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And then the next layer beyond that is, are you now gonna make a choice to spread the prosperity to others in our community, to your family, and to your friends? You know what I mean? But like, it
Yeah.
first starts with you. Like, are you willing to be different and make a different choice and not fall into the
Yeah.
systemic issues around us?
That was the whole "don't be a stereotype" thing. Remember?
Right,
You
right,
being it would just be like, "Oh, this fool didn't show up. You're being a stereotype." Oh, like you played this, you fucking banging music and shit. You're being a stereotype. This fool got the rag on today. You're being a stereotype. Don't be a stereotype. And that's how it used to go.
Yeah. And
But yeah.
and another thing that came to mind a couple of days ago, actually, I forget what we were watching that reminded of us of this, but I was talking to my wife, and I was telling her, like, um, how a lot of times what's missing is the right person with the right lived experience and the right training to facilitate conversations with our youth, right? And we talked about specifically, and this was more predominant like during when you were younger, Steve, as opposed to now. But like,
Mhm.
like when gangs was out like visibly, right, where you can see, norteños, sureños out in the open, right, and you saw the division that it created within our communities, right,
Mhm.
and like, and even thinking back to your hermanos class, right, like our hermanos class when we started was super divided that way as well, with like, quote unquote, I don't know that. Yeah, I mean, some of them were probably lightweight connected to being norteños, and then other Latinos that were recently arrived, right? That were automatically, because you're recently arrived, even are automatically already kind of othered or assumed to be sureños,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? In
Mhm.
this clear division,
Yeah.
right? But if you look back on that experience by the end of the program, like, there was a tight bond for the most part between everyone that cut across that division.
Mhm.
But what it took is the space and the opportunity for us to learn about our commonalities, right? Like, I mean, yeah, like, bro, like, how can you hate on someone that was just recently arrived here whose mom or dad just went through the same shit your family went through 10 years ago? You,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, like, rather than help each other out, like, why would you hate on each other when we're brothers? You know what I mean? Like, why? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And just the space for people to like have that conversation and learn from each other. That is not. It's so rare that happens to this day. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. I agree. I think it was like looking back at it, and I always give I always think about the fact that you were me. The fact that I can tell you about the merengue and the fucking banda and the culture and the shit, because I didn't have a single fucking teacher for 12 years, or yeah, the 12 years I went to fucking public school that was like me. So even having that was enough to be like, oh shit, like you were an example of like I can be something different, and like what the fuck, like you can still be a teacher, but you can still be cool, and you still know the culture, and you know how everything goes around that. Like that, I think that was just as powerful as anything that came out of your mouth that was actually teaching us anything. Just the fact that you were a role model. And I always also say that you were the first person that I felt that cared about me as a person in the school system.
mm,
Like I felt like you were the first one that actually had an interest in my well-being or in me doing good, or like it was you. Like nobody else gave that much thought. I never had any relationship with any other teachers or anything like that. That other people, now thinking back, like you always saw it, right? Like from the what's the called, like the Avid and all those people, how they had like they're there and they have relationships with the teachers and shit like that. Like, nah, it was just whatever you did. But yes.
and there's a couple of things that stand out to me from what you said, right? Like, one, yeah, I agree that there's a lot of meaning to like your teachers and your educators looking like you,
Hmm.
understand understand your experience, right? But I will also say, like, if I think back on those days, like Pablo Gonzalez was super impactful, right? And he was much older by that time.
Yeah.
Right? And remember, like he would talk to you guys about like, meditating and, kind of just being present in the moment and things like that. Right. And I remember like when I first invited him, I was like, oh snap. Like, I don't know how this is going to go. Like visualization and all that stuff. But even though his approach was way different, like so many of you guys connected with him just as much, or even it's for some of you, maybe even more, you know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know. Like, I feel like there's still like, like, cause I think back to those days, I was super young. I was 23. Yeah. I mean, like I had just lived what you guys are living through 5 years ago. Yeah. I mean, but like Paulo was already in his 40s or 50s. Yeah. I mean, looked very different from a different experience, different generation, but still was able to connect with you guys in a very meaningful way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the other thing that really stood out as you were saying that is that the beauty in the progress. Like I remember when I was going through college, again, same thing. There was like 1, 2 Latino, and they were a little older by then, but 2 Latino counselors at the college that I was going to. And of course I connected with one of the 2, right, that were Latino, right? And same to what you said, right? Like I felt like she cared. She was one of the first people that I thought like actually cared in a school setting, right? But if you now look, fast forward to today, if you go to our counseling department, primarily counselors of color. Yeah, I mean, like so that's a sign of extreme progress, right? However, there's still another layer to that, right? Because what I tell our folks is that many of us, not all of us, but many of us were trained to maintain the status quo, right? Even in our master's of counseling program, right? Some of the things we were taught weren't really preparing us to work with the students that we work with at our college. Right. So now it's thinking about, it's almost like retraining ourselves, right? We got the right people in the right places. Now the next level to this work is retraining ourselves to actually do this meaningful kind of work where it doesn't matter if they're meeting with me, with you, or Norma. I mean, like we all have a level of intentionality in the work we do with our students that's guided by a specific framework that we know is effective in working with our students, and that's still a gap. Education that we have a ways to go and I'm trying to figure out still.
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy to hear that other process has been made, since then. Because obviously never really went back after leaving Skyline and shit, and I don't even know what's going on up there anymore,
And
so
which, by the way, it's crazy. There's so many hermanos that work in education now. We have, at least off the top of my head, there's 3 hermanos and hermanas that are now college counselors as well.
Nice.
I don't know if you remember Dino. I think he was like from 1 year after you.
Yeah.
Full-time counselor over here now.
Oh shit, nice.
Yeah, he's doing great things. Like he created a lowrider conference on our campus. Yeah, I mean, like
is that the one with Uloa?
Yeah. He initially did it with Low, and now he's kind of taken ownership over it. So it's like, we have I don't know if you remember Jose Milan and Saul Milan.
Yeah.
Like they both work over here full time. Jose is the classified Senate president on campus.
Oh,
like,
nice.
Bro, I'm telling you, there's like so many hermanos like doing amazing work. Which is
Awesome.
It's beautiful to see. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And I just think back like too, like like you said, it was something very powerful in there because we still have like a different bond with them. Like we might not talk as much, but then there's always that extra like love for each other when we do talk because we connected it, even though it's been years. Like it just feels there's something different about us, no matter which one it is, it just feels cool and we feel connected. We feel like seen, understood. I feel like I have that kind of a community there so that I can always kind of reach out through some shit, even though it's like, most of the time, like we're just all doing our own thing and might have moved or done whatever. But it just feels good to know that we have that connection and we built that connection. And through that one where we were just talking about like our struggles, right? I remember when we sat in a circle and we were just all vulnerable with each other and kind of started sharing that. I remember it might have been Jose that started talking about his mom dying, and then it just kind of went from there and everybody shared the struggles, and I now that I think about it, I'm always talking about the importance of vulnerability and building connections and being able to do that. So it feels good. Like when I think about them, like I still have, like I said, I still feel love for them in a different way than my other classmates that I had in school.
I know why I feel like it would have been a great movie.
Yeah,
Like, if a movie was created based on your
yeah.
goal, like it would have been, yeah.
Because it was not, it's like what I appreciated a lot was like we were just like literally on the verge of not fucking even graduating, and like you did put a bunch of fucking quote unquote tough fucking teenagers, like fucking how many of us were like 20, 25 or something like that, and it was just supposed to be like you never expect the connection and the bond and the kindness and the unity that came out of that shit. Nobody would have, I don't think even you guys expected it for it to turn out to be what it turned out to be, you know?
Yeah. I definitely had no idea. I mean, that was literally my first class I had ever taught. Yeah, I was 23, like where I was trying my best, but I didn't, I was figuring shit out myself. You know what I mean? Like
But
You
then
said
that
the
just
phone.
goes to show that like even even though like you didn't know what you were doing, you were still trying to figure your shit out, like this part of the connecting, right? Like how much of a difference that makes. Because as like high school students, like I'm sitting here because I wasn't part of that. So I'm on the sideline and I'm like, fuck, I'm like so fucking jealous. Like I wish I would have had that. Because since I moved to the States when I was 12, I went to Oklahoma. So it was primarily white and Asian people. Like there was like no Latinos. And if you spoke Spanish, like it wasn't cool back then to be Latino. Um, so I didn't really have that sense of like community to have somebody like teachers, students, until I went to high school. And even the teachers there, even though a lot of them might have been teaching for a long time, that part of that lack of connection, right, like wasn't there. Whereas like you were able, even if you're 23 trying to figure your shit out, super new, first class that you taught, but the impact that you have made on those people 20 years later, like that part of the vulnerability, that connection. I know, I'm
Like
sorry.
20 years later. Sheesh.
that's
We got
crazy
two
though.
years for it. You're not lying. You got 2 years for a 20-year fucking what do you call it? A 20-year fucking
Mhm.
reunion.
It's
Mhm.
almost 20 years.
Yeah.
So, and just like the ripple effect that has caused, like you're saying, back then there was like when you were in school maybe like one two people that were Latino, whereas now a lot of people there are people of color. Like that shows the work that you've put in. So thank you for doing that for the community. um and yeah, this part of like still there is like systemically that gap that is there. I mean, I'm a therapist. I was trained with white people in my master's program. Not one person of color, well, one whitewashed black person, but um like this, like as a therapist, I still feel that there is like I don't have that sense of community. There's not a lot of Latino therapists that I connect with, and a lot of what I was taught there, like systemically, is not a lot of what I do in my work on my day to day, because I'm trying to like fill that gap. So to see that the systemic inequalities that we go through every day, I'm like, fuck, there's so much work we have to do.
But you know what is also fascinating at the same time, right? Because I think of like, if you think about how the counseling, let's say college counseling specifically, how college counseling profession has changed over the generations, a lot of it changed from, like in my case, I became a counselor because my counselor inspired me and motivated me, right? So I was like, oh shit, like, you know what, like it'd be tight to like have this be my job as well, right? So like I followed in her footsteps specifically,
Mhm.
right? Like my generation then, as we were working with our students, I'd like to think that there's many of our, for example, Hermano students and other Puente students that I had that are now counselors or educators, because they may have had a similar kind of experience with me, right? And were then motivated to kind of follow in that, right? And so now you've seen how the profession has completely shifted, right? But it started from the effectiveness of a few
Mhm.
folks in that profession at that time, right? I think whether it be in mental health or even in instruction, if you look at colleges and instruction, I'm sorry, instruction in colleges, still majority of faculty are white.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of faculty of color in instruction, right? So those are like questions to ask ourselves, like why, right? Is it because we still don't have enough motivational instructional faculty that are inspiring the next generation to be college faculty, right? Like there's a reason for it. And same thing in mental health to a certain extent, right? Like, is it that our Latino community is still not accessing mental health support enough or equitably, right? Is it that our mental health professionals, there isn't enough folks like you, Norma, that are like, look like us, that understand us, right? That isn't creating that progress over time. I think those to me are indicators that those professions are still not effective for our community, and therefore you're not seeing the shift in representation in those professions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, should I go for a PhD? I'm like, if I were to do that, because I'm not necessarily interested in instruction, but like in teaching, and at the same time, I'm like, I think it would be good for someone like me to be in those spaces, because I do have she's an ex supervisor, and she's a doctor in psychology. She's a psychologist, Doctora Sandra Leon Villa, and she's like, we need to be in these spaces so we can change them from within. Like we need to infiltrate these systems that weren't made for you and I. So then I'm like, would I have more of an impact if I were to do that? Because yeah, like I'm glad that y'all had somebody that looked like you, that you could follow their footsteps. I didn't have that. Like I had to figure my shit out on my own. Like, how do I become a therapist in during these times?
You're cutting off a little bit.
Oh no. Am I back?
I hear you fine.
I'm back.
It's you, Steve. You're the problem.
Well,
Yeah, it is me. I checked already. Sorry, I thought it was you guys.
It's
Go ahead.
okay.
I'm back.
I forgot what I was saying. I lost my
You're
train.
just saying about considering going and infiltrating spaces where we're not usually represented.
Yeah, if I were to have more of an impact, if I were to do if I were to teach rather than do one-on-one therapy with folks. But then also I'm like, well, a lot of people that I've worked with that look like me, they've told me experiences where they've had therapists that have been white, and they're like, I've had like 3 other therapists and they were white, and it was just like not there. And I think a lot of our folks like that look like us don't seek out the mental health, because it's like it's a white person that's going to be telling me how to live my life. And again, that part of that connection, it's so important. So I'm rambling at this point. Don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, for me, I think of like my own family. There's times where it crossed my mind. I was like, damn, like, my family, like many Latino families, has a lot of trauma from, immigration, the impacts of immigration, the struggle, the generational differences of like, say my parents being born in El Salvador as low income, being disciplined the way they were disciplined by their parents, and then being in a country where they didn't know how to speak the language. My mom was a housemaid, my dad a dishwasher, right? And then having to raise their children here, where culturally things are drastically different, right? Like the constant tension that creates in a family. Never mind all the other deeper stuff, even that goes even deeper beyond that, right? And so I remember at one point thinking, like, man, like it would be amazing for my family to be in a space together, like and have like family counseling. But I was like, then I asked myself, like, I didn't know anyone or really trust that for the most part I could find the right therapist that would be able to guide and facilitate those kind of conversations, that would understand where we were coming from with it. You know what I mean? So it's like I never even tried to like further pursue it. right? But that example, came to mind based on what you were saying. And then the other thing that I was going to share is that, and obviously, normally this would be a very personal decision for you, right? But it reminds me a little bit of when I was a counselor. I loved doing the work that I was doing at the time and working directly with students, right? But I also became very frustrated that I felt like the work I was doing with students was more so an exception, and that most of my colleagues at that time were not were nowhere near doing the same kind of work with the students, right? And so I was just thinking to myself, like, I just became frustrated with like the profession as a whole, right? And so then I started thinking to myself, like, how cool would it be to be in a position where you can influence, who gets hired, how folks get trained, where budget resources go. Obviously very different kind of work, right?
Mm-hmm.
I saw the potential like influence that I could have at a different level.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I remember he was a senior counselor at that time. He came up to me when he learned that I was leaving the position for an administrative position at that time, and he was like, I don't see you being an administrator. And he was like, I think you should be a counselor. You know what I mean? Hey, his opinion was his opinion, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was from a good place or not, but regardless of that, you know what I mean? It's like I had to make that personal decision. What I thought was best for me and where I thought I could be most impactful. And lastly, I'll say from my experience, like I also remember his name is Jeff Duncan Andrade, and I remember I saw him speak one time, and he had his doctorate, and I was like, dang man, like he inspired me because at that time I didn't even like, even though I was a counselor at that time, I wasn't quite clear on what I would have to do to be, become a doctor as well, right? And so, like seeing him was like, damn, like if he did it, he came from where I came from. Again, he looks like I look like bro, like this is possible. You know what I mean? And then I want to go talk to him, and he broke it down to me, and the next thing you know, I was like, all right, like I'm gonna go for it. you know so yeah, but I think you have an interesting decision, Norma, because I'm sure you're doing very impactful work, as a therapist, right? And then just making the decision of like, or you could do both. You know what I mean? Like you could also teach, right? And be a therapist, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to necessarily just do one or the other. But,
Yeah. Yeah. That is true. Thank you. That's what sometimes these conversations are a love-hate relationship with these, because then like my mind starts going. I'm like, well, maybe. So you've like planted a seed right now. So thank you for that.
yeah.
Mhm. Good, good. All right, let's get to define what was supposed to be the topic, but it's all
I
good.
know.
We go off on here all the time. It's all good. These conversations end up being better anyways most of the time than the ones we had planned. So it's all good. So tell me now, Luis, after 33 minutes of saying some other shit, what is critical consciousness?
Yeah. So let me define it in its most basic way, right? To me, I break it down into two parts, right? First, that you're able to critique the inequities around you, right? And secondly, that you then are going to take action to change that status quo. You know what I mean? But the first step really begins with, are you able to identify the different systemic inequities around us, which again include from multiple perspectives, right? Like, educational, societal. You could break it down by criminal justice system. Then the impacts that those systems have on our families, our communities, and then ultimately individually, right? And I remember, talking with students like, yeah, when you're in a system where you're in essence getting pushed out of school, right, where you lack resources in your community, where you're constantly in an uphill battle, it makes sense why, quote unquote, you don't have motivation to get your degree, or you're not doing your homework or whatnot. You know what I mean? So that's the first part of critical consciousness is, can you break down, can you understand the inequities around you and how that impacts you, your community, and your family, right? The second step is, okay, now that you have that knowledge, what are the resources, tools, historic examples that we can learn from, that we can learn how to then take action against that status quo in our daily lives, right? So when you put the two together, that's when you really have a critical conscious mindset.
Mm.
And the thing about it too that I always used to tell my students, right, is that you don't have to work in education, you don't have to be a counselor to help change the status quo. You could do that from any position that you're in, right? You could be a business owner, you could be a mechanic, whatever the hell you're in. There's always a way to give back to your community. There's always a way to increase the awareness and consciousness of those around you, right? So yeah, it doesn't matter what profession you're in. You can always, make an impact on your community and others as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I feel like that's where I fit in. That's what I do because I don't have anything. Like I say, I just do the photography stuff and all that, and I'm getting into coaching. Uh, but I'm always questioning. I'm always looking into getting more information and doing to shit on anything that I come across. And like, um, I see the impact in my family, in my friends, and my community. Right? Of
Yeah.
just always going from that and trying to learn and understand and challenge, question all that stuff. Um,
And one reframe that I would suggest for you to kind of think about that I noticed a little bit in the way you said it, right? Like you said something like, I just do the photography thing, or I just, yeah, I mean, like you kind of, it came across as you minimized it. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like you got to own that. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like it's not just photography. Like, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, yeah. So, like own that. You know what I mean? Like don't minimize what you do and are doing,
Yeah, I got you. Well, I just say compared to like having degrees and being educated and all this shit, but I understand. I also completely like because the conversation we had with your when you had your therapist show up normal. I'm completely fine with not being silenced because I just don't have a degree or anything like that. Like I'm able to just kind of stand what I believe in, question and challenge things like that. So that doesn't. It's not like that having the title doesn't hold me back or doesn't make me think that I'm like less of it somehow.
Yeah, but you're still somehow saying, I just do photography.
Yeah.
And as if somehow doing that doesn't have like the same weight as having like a professional degree. I mean, like if you think about it, the impact that you have on people is just as big as maybe the work that Luis or I are doing, right? Because you're literally helping people capture moments in their life that they're not going to be able to have anymore, right? Like you are like in a picture being able to um freeze, that's the only word that's coming to mind, to freeze like beautiful moments, like once in a lifetime moments. So it's not just photography, that's beautiful work. That is
Yeah.
beautiful work. So
Thank you.
so
Thank you.
give yourself that
And,
credit.
and I'll add this to it too. It's like I know folks that have bachelor's degrees and sometimes even master's degree that don't have the level of consciousnness or awareness that you have.
100%.
You know what I mean? Like, so,
That's,
yeah. And it's a work in progress. I hear it from you, right? It's just like, again,
yeah,
I just am bringing it to your awareness, right? As a
yeah,
continued
yeah,
work in progress to own
yeah.
it. You know what I mean?
I appreciate
Yeah.
it. That's still my proudest fucking thing that anybody's ever told me was my communications professor at Skyline said you're the most socially conscious student I've ever had.
Mm.
Like that still remembers to that, and I like take a lot of pride on that shit because just the
Yeah.
conversations we were having, and I would just want to throw it in there, even within the photography, in a way that I'm challenging the status quo, is we push real moments because it's just like I see people wanting fucking perfection and perfect bodies, perfect skin, perfect shit, and that's what they're going
Mhm.
for. And even
Mhm.
in that way, I'm like, well, we're different. Like we capture moments whatever your hand placement or your shit or like try to make you as beautiful as possible. Like yes, we help you out and we do go above and beyond to try to make you look your best as possible, but at the same time we want realness. We capture realness, we capture moments. We love the pictures of the madness of the kids running around and fucking pulling the thing and all that. Like that's reality. That's who you are as a family. You're not this perfect fucking post the thing there. So
Mhm.
even in that way, I catch myself continuously telling people and we educate them in that way to be like, well, doesn't have to be this way. Let the kids be and you'll appreciate it because that's exactly who you are versus the whole standard of like the beauty standards that are
Mhm.
the common where everybody just wants to be perfect.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I don't know if Hermano's still doing the DJ thing. I don't think he is, but like I can imagine like having a wedding or like a quinceañera, like having you as a photographer and Herman as the DJ. That would have been fire, man. That would have
Yeah,
been
we did do that. I want to say we worked together about like 10, 15 times where I was the photographer and he was the DJ.
yeah,
Mm.
that
So
must have
yeah,
been
it
a hell of a
was.
party.
Yeah, you bet, right? That was really good, but yeah. Cool. I mean, I just want to continue to talk about this stuff, right? Like maybe the question would be is like we talked about like education and some things, but like how else or what other way that we can maybe help people understand that how these systems affect us on the daily basis, because I find myself sometimes honestly overwhelmed by that. Like I have been saying for shit 3 4 years now that I'm moving out of the country, because I look around and I'm like, holy shit, everything seems to be completely against me, and it feels like I have to be part of the system to try to make a shit ton of money just to survive and stepping on other people, and then looking at like wars and all these things and the new president that's coming up and all this shit, and I'm just like, well, that does affect me all like daily, right? Economically, with my mindset to be like, how much should I be giving in and pushing, and is there another way, another country, another place where it's easier because of the healthcare, because of, like I said, all these issues that we have around here that I think people are not aware of. And I think I just answered the question that I was just asking um yeah. Well, what other ways other than that, if you guys can think of any ways? Because my thing is like I think a lot of people just look within, have the blinds on, where they're just, and I think all most of us by the system are taught to blame ourselves. They're going back to the point that we talked about. Oh, it's me. I'm overweight because of me 100% of the thing. I am struggling financially because of me. I'm whatever, in whatever other way is myself, and it's a lot of that shit, and a lot of people suffer because of that mentality, right? Of this like bust your ass 100%, works a fucking 80 hours a week and all this stuff. Otherwise, you're not getting it, and that's the reason why, because you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things, right? Like I think on one end, I think for a lot of us, you kind of get to that age where you naturally start questioning, like, also like the how your life has come to a certain point of your life. Yeah, I mean, like, like I've had very similar thoughts of like, damn, like it's a lot. It's work. Like I've shared with you, outside of this, Steve. Like for me, it's like I'm privileged to have a really good profession. It is a demanding job, but despite the profession that I have, San Francisco is hella expensive. You know what I mean? And like, and also like, I do want to be able to like, provide a certain, experience for my family. I want to have certain kinds of experience. Like I love to travel, for example. You know what I mean? Like, and so like, I come to realize like my salary and my wife's salary isn't enough to really, live the kind of life that we want to live. Right. So then, like I thought about creating businesses. Right. And so, but in creating those businesses, you only, like me personally, I only become stretched thin even further because you're even more busy, right? Like I already have a demanding job and now I have these other kind of commitments that I'm also trying to juggle. Right.
Mhm.
And so it gets to the point where it's like, damn, like would it be better to move somewhere else, out of state or out of the country, where life could potentially be different? Right. So I think to a certain extent, like that is in our culture here, that is part of what a lot of people experience when you hit a certain age and you start reflecting on your life. So yeah, I would just say that you're having the same thoughts that many of us have had or will have, in the years to come. But in regards to critical consciousness and and how else we can move that work forward, right? I think for one, I know that it is hard with like like say sometimes friends, right? Like you can't just be like at a restaurant, having a meal or having some drinks, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, bro, let me break down the inequities around us. You know what I mean? Like, for the most part, people
He's silly. He thinks it's not possible.
Steve will be like, so have you
Bro,
heard of?
that's my main fucking problem, bro. I don't give a fuck. I'll fucking break it all down and be like, this, and that fucking happening. Let's
Yeah.
go to this shit, man.
But it'll depend a lot on the person, right? To some
Yeah.
people, it's going to come across as preaching, right?
Mhm.
To other people, they're going to roll their eyes, right?
Yeah.
And then there's going to be some folks that actually hear you,
Mhm.
right? So that is one way, right? But you are going to encounter a lot of resistance depending on who you're talking to. You're going to encounter a lot of resistance along those lines, right? Like, oh, here comes Steve preaching this stuff again, kind of thing.
Story of my life.
You know what I mean? But I give you props though, like for doing it, right? Because like, hey, like you got to cross to some people, right? You may have not hit everyone, but you got to cross to some people that may have otherwise not heard it, right? So I give you props for pushing through it. But in addition to that, right? Sometimes I think it's just like, especially with their own families, their own kids, right? Like, putting a movie on, right, that has a socially conscious, theme to it, right? And like having those conversations with your son or daughter, right? Like helping them kind of see, the bigger picture behind it and analyze what they're seeing in the movie, right? With our families, I think is incredibly important, especially for me, right? Like my wife is white, right? And so, my kids are mixed, right? So it's like for me, it's very important that I teach my kids their family history, right? Like how my parents' experience was drastically different than their lived experience now. My lived experience was drastically different than their lived experience. They might not see the same struggles because of how we prospered, but they need to understand where we came from to be able then to, like, again, just better understand folks around them that look like them. Our kids aren't going to get that level of consciousness on their own, and they're not likely to get it from education, right? So a lot of times we need to create the space to have those conversations with our kids, right? I think outside of that, again, professionally, I will say whether you're working in photography or in mental health or in education or something else, we all have opportunities to help the next generation out, right? Like we all can mentor somebody, we all can give someone that opportunity. That is a different form of progress as well, right? Where we're helping someone financially, right, see different possibilities in front of them, right? Off the top of my head, those are some examples that come to mind. And I think a lot of times leading by example too is another powerful one, right? Like when people see, quote unquote, that you're successful and yet finding ways to make a difference in others' lives, right? Like, you're setting an example for others to see, and sometimes those other folks will follow as well, right?
Yeah.
I think a great example of that comes to mind for me is my health journey, right? With health, like when I started to be really serious about getting smarter around why I had become overweight, right? What was leading me to become overweight, right? And then finding the solutions on how to change my life around that, and others started noticing the change. They're like, "Oh shit! Like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, what's going on, right?" And then they started following that same example as well, right? So again, like just leading by example is another a powerful way as well.
Yeah. And it could be like little things, like as you were talking about the movie, watching something. My mom tells me, like she jokingly tells me, but she's like, "Ay, Morena, tú arruinaste las novelas para mí." I'm like, why? And she's like, because before I could just like sit down and just watch a novela and not question anything. Like that's just what I grew up with. That's what it was. But now I see it and I'm like, oh, why is the main character always like lighter skin, like pretty, and like the brown people are like the domestic workers, right? And like siempre las mujeres son como like las sufridas and all of these things that now she notices when she's watching shows, where before she would not even be aware of that. And even other things that she'll watch, she'll be like, oh, I was watching this, y fíjate, me fijé que esto que me platicaste, blah, blah, blah. And it's like it's on there, right? So she's starting to see those things little by little with clients here, right? Like I have first generation like Mexican American clients that are 18, 21, and they are like on their first internship, first job type of thing, and they're like, I want to buy a car, but I have no idea what that looks like I don't know what credit is, like, because like my parents never taught me about credit. Like I didn't know what the fuck that was, like loans, credit cards, like I didn't know any of that. So I had to learn how to do that. So many times mental health looks like that, right? Like in session, we will do a session psychoeducation of like what is credit? How do you build that? Like how do you open your first credit card? Opening up a high yield savings account, like all of those things that I just learned within the last 2 years that now I'm giving to somebody else that is way younger. And that's knowledge that their parents don't have either time or even the knowledge themselves on how to do it, right? So those are little ways that we can like start planting those seeds that we always talk about, to be like, hey, like these are things that you need to look out for.
And on a side note, Latino networks are some of the most toxic networks that are out there. Like to me, it's sad, like
It's
how
bad.
much negative
It's bad.
impacts it has on our community. I mean, like so many of our parents, that are just Spanish speaking, that's all they watch. Like my mom, she watches nothing but the Latino networks. And if you really sit and see what they like show all day, every day, right? It's like the news are some of the most gruesome, like bad, you know what I mean? Like just highlighting the worst of our communities for the most part, la novelas, like you've already talked about. It's just like, and this is what our people are constantly fed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just so sad. It really is. But
Yeah.
sorry, that was just a side note because
No, it's true though.
Just hire me to walk into every family's house and then I'll be like, all right, bitch, here's the fucking breakdown on this shit. This is what's happening here. This is what's happening here. But yeah, the ruining shit, I feel like that's like my role. That's what I do to people. I just kind of fuck shit up for people. Like just right now, my wife was, before we start recording, she's watching like some fucking, I don't know, like a TV show on Netflix or some shit. And it's like the daughter is dating for the first time and shit like that. And I'm just like, I gave it like fucking 45 seconds, and then I just told her what the plot was gonna be, and then I just sat there watching and be like, told you, done. That's the shit. Like this, or like or like my cuñada or other people watch like the dating shows, and then I'm just sitting there like, okay, wait, because I have the knowledge of photography. I'm like, well, this had to be set up because of this. Look how many different angles they're setting up. So although it feels like a moment that is humble and genuine and real, they're standing in a very specific lighting thing from this and all this, or like all this shit is that. And then I would just say it aloud and then just be like, all right, fuck it, like cool. That's what it is from there. I'm sorry to fuck up your shit and your emotional ride in this fucking setup of of that. But yeah, said Norma almost started fucking dying laughing when you said you can't just fucking do that, and then I'm like, the fuck you can. You hit it right on the spot, because that's my struggle, bro. Like
yeah, you will.
I don't have an issue. Like I'll fucking walk around just telling you shit. But yeah, I mean, shit. Even in that way, like you said, I think we're all doing it in our own way, even if it's doing it that way or however the impact that you guys are having in your communities and your families and all that stuff. Like that's the point of it, right? Like we can all do it in our own way.
Yeah, and one thing that I've been trying to figure out that I haven't been able to yet, but like I've had the idea in my mind, and I've also come across others that had a similar idea, but it's just hard given all the things that we juggle to put it into practice. But like reminds me, you remember Ivan Martinez from back in the day?
Mm-hmm.
So he's actually, I think he's coaching at South City now.
Yeah.
I forget what other position he has, but I know he's coaching. And he was telling me about like, he wanted to create like a community organization here, kind of, focus on working with our youth, but involving sports, because so many of our youth, are invested in sports, right? So how do you leverage sports as a way to kind of just make them better young men as well? And I was like, hell yeah, like it fired me up. I was like, let's do it. I'm down, but then again, it just kind of like falls flat because it's just, again, the time, right? It's like, how do we find that time to implement something like that? Steve, I think you've even told me stuff about that, something similar, ideas similar to that in the past, right? And most recently reminded me, I saw a movie on Netflix called The Forge. Have you guys seen it or no?
No.
No, no, no.
Okay, so it's not that great of a movie, but the message behind it was pretty much like it was an older African American man who mentored others, and then eventually the others he mentored then mentored the younger generation, right? So it eventually became 10 older men that now were each mentoring a group of young men, and then collectively it grew to like a larger group, right? And they were teaching the young men like about also like financial success, right? And so to me, right, even a group like that, right, where it's similar to a certain extent like hermanos, but outside of the school setting, where the working of itself is still critical consciousness, is still developing that brotherhood, and now we're adding the element of financial prosperity, right?
Mhm.
Like that would be so powerful and impactful in
Mhm.
our communities,
Mhm.
right? But it's just like, the ideas are there, and I feel like the know-how is primarily there. It's just more so the time to be able to do it. You know what I mean? And it always eats at me because like, damn, like I know it's needed out there, but it's just so hard to like to make it happen,
There's a
Yeah.
fucking system that has you to keep on working.
Right, right.
Yeah.
It's all part of the same shit.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've been wanting. I'm not been wanting to. I'm just have some shit going on, but I'm gonna start a nonprofit for mental health stuff. We're starting it with Norma, so that
Okay.
we're able to provide free mental health services to people and shit like that.
Wow, that's
'Cause
awesome.
I also have a client now. Like I don't have the title of therapist, but that doesn't stop me. Like I have a client now that I work with, and I put in a lot of work to my mental health stuff. It's become my passion to help people out. So I'm also starting to help out people that way. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna put together soon. Yeah, and I'm gonna use the resources. Obviously,
Hmm.
I'm gonna hit you up, hit people that I know up, and then just see like how do we put it. Maybe I can tap into you guys and the resources that you have and shit. The
Awesome.
first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask for a donation straight up right now, live on the podcast. How much are you committing to it? How much are you
Chris
committing?
is gonna be like,
Right
connection
away.
is like, oh, sorry, can't hear you. You're not coming through.
That was the whole point of having you on. It was just for this. How much are you committing live on the shit?
That's
Nah, bro. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy. I'm happy we caught up, and hopefully it's not the last time that we see you here and talking about different stuff. Because, like I said, you're one of the people that has impacted in my life, and then I'm very thankful for having you. And just the conversations like this, I think, need to be had
Yeah.
and know that there is people that are because sometimes even I don't know about you guys, but sometimes within this mindset, I feel lonely at times. Like
Yes.
it feels like you're alone and there's not a lot of people that think like you that are like having that intention to help and help other community and do that and doing the right things in the right way. So I think these conversations are very very important that we can have, and we can continue to grow.
Yeah. And one last thing that I'll say too, and well, actually two last things, right? So first and foremost, I don't want to forget to say that like I'm incredibly thankful to you and all the Hermano students because I've learned so much through you guys. Like probably like I wouldn't be surprised if I learned more from you guys than you guys did from me at the end of the day.
Mhm.
Um,
You're
you know,
welcome.
our experiences together, like I wrote my dissertation on that. You know what I mean? Like on our
Yeah.
experiences together. I use what I learned through our experiences that ultimately I learned through my dissertation. I use it in my work to this day. You know what I mean? Like and it was the first sign in my career where I like you guys were my first example of like, you know what, like things can change, things can be different. This work does matter. Like I saw the change and you guys, which to me was like that's all I needed to see to like really continue to motivate me and inspire me in the direction that I went.
Mhm.
Right. So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure I didn't forget to mention that today, that like I really appreciate, you guys and all that I learned from you guys as well.
Yeah.
And then the second piece that is something that we didn't have time today to kind of get into, but like in my career, I also struggled a lot. This is one thing that probably has ate at me at different points in my life, right? Like I remember and this I was still fairly early in my career. I think I was like about to finish my doctorate, and there was two people that I think were incredibly influential that I looked up to. One was Jeff, and then the other
Mhm.
one was Cesar Cruz, who you also know, Steve.
Mhm.
Right? And like I remember, asking myself, like, dang, like Cesar like devotes his life, like I feel like damn near every minute of his life to this work. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, and at that time I was questioning, like I knew that I was one of the few privileged Latino males that was getting a doctorate degree, right? Like, and so I was like, I often would question myself, like, am I doing enough? Should I also be, you know, pretty much? I saw it to a certain extent, honestly, like sacrificing most of my life, like to this work, right? What is, the kind of balance that I should be striving towards, right? So that's something that I struggled with, for a lot of my career, and
Mhm.
then eventually, as I had a family, right, and I was starting to also expand my mind. Then I started struggling with the notion of like, financial decisions, right? Like I remember, and actually even in the very beginning, I remember some of the hermanos, you guys were like hella pissed off when I was leaving Skyline. And I was like, bro, like I'm over here part time, man. Like I just got a full time job. You know what I mean? Like you know what I mean? But in part, it was a fight. It was informed by a financial reality. You know what I mean? And those patterns just continued later on in life, right? And then I started feeling like a sense of guilt of like,
Mm.
damn, should I not be like trying to like make money? You know what I mean? Like, should I just be focused on this, right? And to me, what I've kind of learned, and we're all different, right? Like like, and this is just like for anyone that might be listening that has those similar sentiments or struggles. From my perspective, I think it's okay for folks to like try and make money and financially prosper, right? But a lot of it comes down to like still being mindful of helping others along your journey, right? And secondly, like yes, it's okay, like because sometimes I used to see things like why is it that primarily only white people can enjoy certain luxuries or certain things, so it used to piss me off, like bro, like I want to be, like I want to enjoy that stuff too, you know what I mean? Like, and I know I have, like if I were 100% entrepreneur, like I, I have a confidence that I would be like probably a millionaire. You know what I mean? But to me, it's been a balance where it's like, okay, I want to be in a profession that has a sense of purpose to me, where I'm helping others, while at the same time being able to financially prosper, so that not only I and my family can experience some of the nicer things, but also then I can help set up the future generations of my family, right? And like I feel like we shouldn't feel the sense of guilt for like trying to do that, for ourselves and for our families. Like, life is short, right? Like it's also about enjoying your personal life. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I don't know. I'm just sharing that out there, like that, in my opinion, it's okay, right? And that we shouldn't feel that sense of guilt of, it's a personal decision for all of us, and whatever decision we make is all good. It's just again a matter of, I think, understanding each other and where we come from with it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That was.
That
I've
landed
been.
right here.
Yeah, something that I've been also thinking about and struggling lately, because I did really well financially before I moved to Southern California. And thinking now, like now being over here, and like I said, just becoming more aware of shit, and like going back, like I often, I don't know if I told Norma, but I find myself again being who I was in college in my mindset, and that uh, standing up for injustices, being outspoken, not being that, because I think that died down when I focused on my business and the family and stuff like that. So I'm becoming that fucking person again, and just thinking about all that. Um, so it's been something that I also been dealing with and struggling with. I just find it like there has to be a balance at some point, and like yes, I agree with you that like also like one thing that I'll tell you, the fucking Pablo's knowledge, right? You have a guitar. I literally, he told me this shit. You're playing a guitar, the strings, they're too loose, they're not gonna work. If you tighten them too much, they're not gonna work. Like there has to be some kind of balance in between, and that's where you play the fucking tune, right? That's the shit of doing it. Um, my honestly, and this is here goes the shit that I'm just being directly with the shit. A lot of people use your mentality and take it to the shit. Take it, continue and take it, and they don't check themselves constantly, and they just get into that, like, oh yeah, I deserve this, I deserve this. Surely you deserve it, but then it goes to like, well, for example, like I even to be, I even told this to my brother. He has a Tesla now, and then there was some talks about some money and shit like that, and I literally told him like, what? Before you used to dream of a fucking Tesla, now you have a Tesla, and then what? Now you want a fucking Ferrari? Now you're gonna want a Lamborghini. Now you're gonna want a Bentley. When is that shit gonna stop? Well, like where is the shit where you get to a point where that's enough? Because people take, like I said, what you're saying, and I'm not saying that you do this because obviously you put in the work to help other people when you're here on the fucking podcast. But that's the concern that like, how do you continually check yourself for leaning too much into that shit? Because it becomes your new normal to strive and want more. And now, like, oh, now I did this, or I already went to fucking Hawaii, so now I want to go to Dubai, and now I want to do this. And I already took a month off. I want to take 2 months, and then in 3 months, and all this shit. Like, how do we get that accountability of this shit? You know, like, how can you continually ask yourself, do I really need this shit? What else can I be doing? Is this really necessary for shit? That's the thing that I'm like, because I think a lot of people, like I said, think like you and do that, but I don't think they have that ability to be accountable, because then you start getting into environments that continue to push more and more and more and more and more and more and more, you know. And
Yeah.
there's
It's super complex. It's super complex, right? Because on one end is like, well, let's use your brother as an example, right? Like, okay, he got to the point where he has a Tesla. Like, say, then he creates his own business, right? And has put in the work to like scale his business, and he figured that shit out. Now he can get a Ferrari or whatever the fuck it is. You know what I mean? Like, and then he continues building on it, right? On one end, I mean, more power to him, especially if he's able to still find a way to like give back, whether it's financially or hire folks of color, or, give, internship opportunities, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, if he finds a way, to a certain extent, more power to him. But I can also see how like it can limit potentially the impact that you can have in the community as a whole, because like, well, in a certain way, right? So like, I'll use myself as an example now, right? So like, I have a very demanding job. Let's say I wouldn't have committed to starting businesses to further financially prosper, right? I would obviously have more time to then do stuff in the community, like the idea that I was telling you about, right? Like a community organization, right? I'd have more time to do that, right? So on one end, we can critique it and say, well, like, that is, you're falling to a certain extent into the systemic realities around us, where it's work, 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 and you're expected to be so busy with work that you can't then change the status quo around you, right? Which to a certain extent, there's a lot of truth to that, right? And on the other hand, you have like, well, shit, like, life is also very short. You know what I mean? Like for you, for all three of us, our visions are obviously going to be different, because we're three different people. You know what I mean? So like, is it a bad thing for me pursuing whatever my vision is, as long as, again, I can be mindful enough to still be able to effectively, impact others along the way. You know what I mean? Like, and who knows? Like, let's say, we need more Latino millionaires and billionaires as well, because once you get to that level, then you have folks like, let's say, the Bill Gates Foundation, right? Like, they donate a shitload of money. You know what I mean? It's just, you know what I mean? So, but it's very complex. It's incredibly, and that's what I was saying earlier, right? Like, it's something that's ate away at me from the very beginning, right? Even when I had my master's, it's something that I see like in someone like Cesar that I respect so much, that he, sacrificed, I feel like, a lot of his life. He opened his own school, right? But I still see that he also, at the same time, it comes across as he's still financially struggling, even though he has a fucking doctorate from Harvard. You know what I mean? Because he's made a decision to apply his life in a way that's all about his community, right? And I have all the respect for him in the world for doing that. I just came to a point in my life where I was like, I couldn't commit to that, and I felt like it's okay to not beat myself up over it or feel guilty over it. Like, I mean, like I just got to the point where I came to peace with that, and that we're different people, and that I still feel that in my core, I'm still making an impact enough on others along my journey as well, while trying to live the best version of my life that I see. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
complex. I'll just say
Mhm.
that.
It
But
is. It is. I'm gonna at some point I'm gonna fucking go off grid and have chickens and shit and do that. Then I'll get back to you about it after I try
what you
that
said?
shit. Like I'm gonna just fucking there's like this idea of me at some point to just fucking just completely just not give a fuck about anything, like, and just go back to my small town in Mexico and fucking just live off of the
Con las
fucking whatever
gallinas.
shit it is and the simple life. And then I'll go experience that when I get a chance, maybe when my girls are older. Then I'll come back and then I'll tell you how it went and what the fuck the difference was from that, right? Because then like I'm telling you, I can do this all day. Then my shit would be like, well, why do we need all that extra shit? Like, why do we need to do all those extra things? Yes, you want to experience them, I want to do all that shit, but then I just be like, well, how come some people have the happiness in just the stupidest simple fucking, not stupid, but like the most simple life,
Mhm.
where they don't need anything. They don't see, oh, I want this for my kids. Like not in the educational wise or in building critical consciousness and all that stuff, but in the way of like needing more and more and more and more and more and more and
Yeah.
more.
Mhm.
Like some people don't have that, because that's also back to the same shit I think of. Like that's how sometimes we measure success and what we want and striving more and all that shit. But
Mhm.
I just see sometimes like, well, people are perfectly happy with having that. And here I think it's the shit of like we get exposed to this idea and this thing of wanting more, and I'm just like in the, like I really want to try it. I
But I
really
think
had a
that's the
really
beauty
good
of life, right? That's the
yeah.
beauty of all of us being different. Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
like, like I think of like sometimes, like when I've traveled to like say I went to the Dominican Republic, right? And I remember the Dominican Republic, out of all the places I've been to, is one of my favorite, if not my most favorite place I've ever been to, because in meeting people there, like just random people, like you just saw a certain kind of joy and happiness in them. That they had this big smile, right? Like even when I was like say at a hotel, right? The workers were like dancing, they had big smiles. You know what I mean? Like the energy you found around you was like it was very impactful. You know what I mean? And yet they're low income. Yeah, I mean, but they seemed, at least from afar, they seemed very happy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I remember my mom also telling me when she was living in El Salvador, she was like, I was happy. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we were poor, but I was happy. You know what I mean? And so it's like sometimes you have people that have a very simple life that
Mhm.
are happier and even more successful in their own way than someone that could be a millionaire.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
again, like to me, it comes down to like that's the beauty of life, right? Like one thing is not going to be for like we're all different people, right? You know what I mean? Like it's not going to be the
Yeah.
same for all of us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but
Definitely. I
but I
remember.
agree with you though that I think the way you're thinking of it, like if we were all more the way you described, I think the world would change in a positive direction in a quicker, right?
Yeah.
Because we all would be more invested in our own well-being and each other's well-being as
Mhm.
opposed to just making money and having these luxurious experiences.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So I'll just
Yeah.
say it's complicated
No,
again.
no, no. Yeah, it is. It is. And I remember I talked to my grandma, right? Like my grandma's 85, and like she was around because one of my aunts got sick, so she was around over here. She's usually in Mexico. She was around over here for like 4 or 5 months straight. So then just started talking to her and developing a deeper relationship with her and shit. And then I don't know where one time she's like, "Mijo, aquí tienen todo, están muy a gusto y todo, pero dan toda su vida para tener lo que tienen. Allá se trabaja para tener para comer ahora, para ver qué hay mañana y para acá, y no hay ninguna presiones de nada ni todo eso. Y se tienen todos los lujos de la vida, pero entregan su vida para poder tener todo esto." And I
Mm,
Chingue a
was
su
like,
madre.
shit. I was like, shit. Okay, grandma. Like, cool. That's what I'm telling you. It's very it's like you said, it's very complicated and complex and hard to kind of put together, right? It's just like I'm telling you, you go back to that point. Like there's nothing. I don't think there's anything wrong with what you're doing because of the time that you're putting into it. But most people are not this mindful, and they use the same logic that you're using to continue to pursue wealth, but there's nothing else in there that allows you to fucking check yourself along the process, because who are you encountering along the way is what I'm saying. Who becomes the people that you're around? Once you start getting more and more money, you're not hanging out with the fucking homeless person in the fucking street. You're not going to the liquor store. You're not going to the fucking panaderia now you're fucking going to portos, you're going to this, you're that, and you're becoming disconnected from the shit, and you start forgetting those fucking things because now you're talking to CEOs, now you're talking to fucking more wealthy people, and that becomes your reality. So who's checking you?
And in fact, you get
Who's
kind of
checking you?
taught that you should change your friends and your network. Like that's part of what you get taught, right? As you're kind
Mhm.
of like,
Yeah,
prospering financially as well. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
but
yeah, man, yeah.
Yeah.
that's the that's a tough thing. I think we all have to, and that is cool also, because this is also a conversation that we have from coming this consciousness. I
Hmm.
don't think people that think about this shit think about, like, I don't think the people that don't have this knowledge think about this kind of issues of having that thing in there, like
Yeah,
having this
and one
complicated
last
But
thing, I
thing.
then,
know it's like we're been talking hell long already, but one last thing that comes to mind
No,
around
if you have time, but we can keep going. Like, I don't know.
this.
I was just
Yeah,
saying, I don't know if you guys have
Luis is
time.
like, I got a job to do.
yeah,
Y'all
it's 1:30.
take it.
I got to get off real soon. But I was going to say the other key to this, especially for you said it was your abuelita that said that,
Yeah,
or yeah.
yeah,
So like, is are you passionate about what you're doing, right? If you are is the same concept as I was saying before, right? If you are doing a job that you see yourself as sacrificing your life in order to earn more money, in order to have these luxuries, then what your grandma said is 110%, right?
mhm,
However, there's a nuance to it, right? If you found a way where you are passionate about what you're doing and you love it, right? Even though you might be working long hours, even though you might be sacrificing on other things, right? You are loving what you're doing, right? So it's a very different experience than sacrificing for the money. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, yeah,
it's a difference in that,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I'll say this too, like that I find interesting, right? Because so to me, right, like I've mentioned, like yeah, like I've had the privilege now to be able to like invest in some businesses, and interestingly enough, this weekend I'm going to flying into Puerto Vallarta, but it's actually to Nayarit, and he's one of our employees that works in a party rental business. But this guy, he has land in Nayarit, that he got, passed down from family, when the land wasn't that didn't have nowhere near the value that it has now, right? And he's low income, right? Like he's working here in the United States, in a very like low paying job per se, right? And he comes here to like earn money, and then he sends what he can back to Mexico, to his family, to have the farm that he has. He has like a fruit farm over there, very small, right? And so he comes to me with this idea, like, Luis, like, what if you invested in our business so that we can then build like a refrigerator, right? That allows us to freeze our fruit, and then we can produce way more than what we do now. And like in essence, his business and his life would drastically change if his vision would actually come to like be successful,
Mhm.
right? On my end, right, I know that that's something that most business people or most investors would not do, because there's no proof of concept, right? There's no financials. There's like there's no, you can't show me for certain that what you have envisioned is going to work, right? And here I am going to hand over a significant amount of money for you to build this refrigerator. You know what I mean? So it's like on one end, but I am super open to the idea, because like to me, I see that as an opportunity to combine the two, right? Of like, it could be financially good for both he and I, and at the same time, I feel like I'm potentially giving an opportunity to somebody that doesn't have the network or the access to that kind of money to even be able to take his shot. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
so yeah, so I'm excited to go over there this weekend and kind of learn more about what he's doing, and we'll see what happens with that one.
Good
Awesome,
luck
awesome.
with that.
Uh,
Yeah, good luck, bro.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Anything
Norma,
else?
Steve, again, appreciate y'all and what you guys are doing. I enjoyed. This is a great example. I spent an hour, 20 minutes, and I loved every minute of it. Did not feel like work or sacrifice or anything. If I could be doing this for 10 hours a day, it sounds pretty fun.
I know. Yes.
For sure.
Yes. Thank you.
No, thank you for having us again. We
you.
appreciate it. Like I said, it won't be the last time. Reach out to us. I'll reach out to you whenever we want you to come out, and we really appreciate your time and all the knowledge and all the community that we're building here.
Yes. Thank you.
Good,
Thank you.
So here's our email, mindfulpodcastliving@gmail.com, for any feedback, any comments. If you want to talk shit, whatever it is, you want to be a guest, let us know. Mindfulpodcastliving@gmail.com. And what was the saying, Norma?
You got to let go in order to grow.
Peace.